Do you love webcomics? Do you make webcomics? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then do I have news for you. May 12th is Webcomic Day, a time to celebrate our favorite webcomics, whether you're making or reading them. You can participate on social media by using the hashtag WebcomicDay and sharing your webcomic making process or gushing about comics you love. Spread the word and share the webcomics. Learn more by visiting webcomicday.com. Hello and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today we're going to be talking about the theme of your story. I'm Miranda. I use she, her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Into the Swell.
And I'm Delphina. I use she, her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Somnolus.
I'm Finn, I use they them pronouns, and I do the webcomic Heirs of the Veil.
And I'm Crispy. I use she, they pronouns, and I make the webcomics Ghost Tongue Sickness and Lunar Blight.
The concept of a theme is something that comes up in writing when we're talking about character motivations or plot in a long form narrative comic. And it's basically a word or a concept that's at the core of what you're trying to say in your story and with your story. So, we're going to talk about what themes are, how they come about, and how you can use them in your comic. So, let's start off with what kind of themes have you consciously or even subconsciously put in the comics that you've made? And we'll start with Delphi.
Oh boy. Okay. This is a good one because I definitely went in with some conscious themes and then people have come back to me with other things that I had no idea I was putting in there. So, one of the things you're going to see in Somnolus is like fixing things. Broken versus fixing is a big theme for Somnolus. There's a lot of plot elements that have to do with things that go wrong, things that are broken that need to be fixed. And that's a lot of the like just adventure plot arcs of the story in general. But then you also get into characters who are coming from crappy backgrounds, who feel a little broken, and what they reach for or what they find to fix that aspect of themselves. So that's very intentional for me, as well as like, what if they don't fix it? What if they just ignore their problems? What happens then? Things get worse. So just trying to show that when we rely on other people, when we reach out to other people and talk about our experiences and how they're similar, like that can lead to solutions that you can't come up with on your own when you're trying to fix your own problems. So that's one thing for me. False dualities is another really big thing. If just visually, you can see I have people with angel wings and people with demon wings. So I'm playing on some genre expectations of that, obviously, and they are kind of at opposed sides in the narrative of Somnolus. But then when you get into like the story, you'll find out, okay, well, there's actually also a duality between people who have wings and people who don't have wings, and how the people who don't have wings are being treated in society and what that means. But then I echo it with like coffee brands, right? I have, a coffee brand of Wingbucks coffee, and the angel peoples have one and the demon peoples have one, and they're exactly the same coffee chain, but they have different logos. So like I'm poking, I'm trying to, the coffee stuff isn't necessarily part of the larger plot of Somnolus, but it is echoing the theme of like, what is even the difference between us? What is even the difference here? It's just the same thing with a different look. And again, you're going back to reaching out to other things. Like we have more similar things than we have differences. And when we can like actually acknowledge that it's a false duality, then we can fix some problems. So I would say those are two really big ones that happen for me in Somnolus. And then other things that people have reached out to me with is total freedom desirable or disastrous? Like some characters really want like a freer code of freedom and like don't want any kind of responsibilities. Some characters want a lot of responsibility and feel safer in that, and what's the difference there? And also just like, is fighting fire with fire the only way to end conflicts? Like Are there other ways of solving things other than violence? Those are things like I'm not really thinking about putting in there. But the beautiful thing about themes is that they're very subjective to the person experiencing the work. And I think for me, it's much easier to see and appreciate in music, because music, it was kind of made for thematic interpretation. When you think of a couple and they have their song, like obviously those two people don't know the musician, but they interpreted the song in a way that ties in thematically to their relationship. So if their relationship was about supporting each other in painful times, or an opposites attract thing where they kind of didn't get along and now they do, or I was in a really bad place and you changed so many things about what I value in myself, like that will be thematic to the song that they pick. So that's another way to kind of conceptualize the subjective part of this, because even if you think you're working towards a theme, someone will come up with a completely different interpretation based on where they are in life. And it's beautiful. That's one of the most beautiful things of putting stuff out there. This is a feature, not a bug, because I feel like sometimes people are like, no, you didn't get my theme. You didn't understand what I was going through for. And there's a frustration in that, but there's also a beauty in when people find value for themselves.
Yeah, so well said. And exactly what I was thinking of, how the subconscious themes kind of are what everyone is getting out of it on their own, because everyone interprets things, reads things differently. And one great thing about any type of media or story that's out in the world. And I love that you point out that the fixing things is your like conscious theme. And it just had me thinking that like Rana is the like she's literally fixing things. And so you have that like very clear person that's fixing the actual items, and then from there like you have everyone else who's like fixing themselves or fixing each other and things like that. And I just thought that was neat.
Thank you.
So well done with that. What about you, Finn? What themes have you subconsciously or consciously put in your comic?
Yeah, well, I think that the main focus in Airs of the Veil is kinda the topic of responsibilities, because when I started to examine the story a little bit, I've noticed that all the characters are kinda like connected through responsibilities that are forced upon them in some way, and then the story kind of happens around this theme through how do they work with these responsibilities. Do they defy them? Do they try to work with it? Do they try to live up to these expectations and responsibilities? And I think this is like the core theme that kinda creates some, I would say, sub themes, because something else that then comes into play are themes of identity, because the way or what people expect of you as a person is like kinda connected also to who you are when it comes to, for example, gender identity. That's something that's really important for Victoria, who is like literally the heir to her house and to her witch's coven, because she's a woman, and then there come certain expectations, certain responsibilities that she is supposed to fulfill, and then this creates like this constant struggle of, is she actually trying to live up to these expectations? Is she going to solve these responsibilities, or is she more like fighting against it and trying to uproot it? And through all this, there's then also themes of old or ancient systems that are bogging people down. And then you have an idea of heritage. What is your heritage? What comes with the idea of you coming from a certain background, etc. So this is basically something that is a theme that I worked out pretty early in the story, and that is mostly the one I'm concentrating on. So any other theme is basically kind of just playing into the big theme, and it's interwoven.
Yeah, I can definitely see all of those themes come through in Heirs of the Veil, especially the identity one. Like that one stood out to me when I was reading it, and so like you definitely conveyed that. And then I love what you said about everything just kind of you have the big one, and then everything else kind of just goes into that big one and wraps it all up and just kind of expands on it. So
Hmm.
very well said. What about you, Crispy? What themes, conscious or subconscious, have you put in your comics?
So many, so many themes. No.
You can only have one.
So themes are interesting because like I find, especially with the fact that like Space and I have like many works kind of like, in behind the scenes kind of in pre-production or actually being made. So we have two comics, Ghost Junk Sickness being finished and we're currently working on Lunar Blight. And in the pre-production, you find something out interesting, and this is what I want for a lot of people, realizing that themes are like a pattern in your work as like individual creators. Like you're going to find that you are attracted to certain things that do pop up in your work a lot. Like subconsciously, that stuff keeps popping up. And we found that out with like writing our stories and going like, okay, like, what does XYZ character want? Was like the desires, what are the motivations, and where do they go from there? And then, kind of plotting out their journey and being like, oh man, a lot of the work that we create has like self acceptance in it and wanting a place to belong. And as far as Ghost Junk Sickness, that is one of the biggest themes, is that it is about finding that place of belonging, and it reflects on all three of the main characters and then also spreads to the other characters too, right down to the actual like, villains or slash antagonists to the story who just want that place of belonging. Like Vaughn always, who is one of the main characters, doesn't know kind of where they fit in, and the journey of Ghost Junk Sickness has them kind of trying to find that place. And it's the same with Trigger, who's also, another main character who tries to run away, but realizes that his place is, kind of where he was chickening out from. Another theme that pops up is, confronting the past. We have all three of the main characters going through things like that. And it also, again, cascades to other characters in the story with, constantly running in to the past, confronting it, being, sideswiped from it, and growing from there or realizing something from there. And then the third theme that we always place into, or we found that popped up a lot in Ghost Junk, is finding that self-worth. And again, all three characters go through a nice arc to find that place, and then also the self-worth that they've wanted from that too. And again, it's really cool because we were realizing as we were writing it, it just kept cascading to other characters, but not in like a way where it's just like, and they all felt like they belong. It was like these things mean different things to different characters and different situations and stuff like that. And it's just that core that just kept coming back up, being like, oh, like it all comes back to that. And, starting our next story, which we're working on now, with Lunar Blight, we kept finding patterns that would come back, but just in different ways. So the themes for Lunar Blight were finding the truth, embracing darkness within, and then the extent you'll go for obsession. So they're different from Ghost Junk, but they still have like a lot of like similarities of like, a character finding that certain place, whether it be darkness or um,
Yeah.
something good within that they want to bring out. But yeah, we're finding like a lot of interesting patterns that we go for it. And we've started, because we've been doing more works now that we've finished Ghost Junk. It's interesting that we're starting with themes more so. I found like when we were writing Ghost Junk Sickness, it came along being like, oh, okay, like I'm realizing this is what we're writing and this is kind of cool. And then we leaned into it. And I think that it made like a satisfactory, like, oh, okay, like this feels like, very satisfying to have like a character arc, have a theme, and it made sense for their actions as the story went along. And then now it's informing how we're writing Lunar Blight, being like, and it's not going to be like calculated either. Like it doesn't feel robotic, but it really helps with deciding where a character is going to go narratively
Mm-hmm.
and making sense with that. Because like, I feel like a theme is going to tie in a lot of that, does this make sense kind of thing? Like, where are we going from here? And it's just a nice little ribbon to kind of wrap up that story. And yeah, that's what we've been kind of focusing on with those two stories.
I feel like with the definitions you gave of the themes, Ghost Junk versus Lunar Blight, I feel like Lunar Blight is like the dark
Yeah,
side of all of the Ghost Junk
it
themes. Like
is.
what happens when you approach this, but from a dark angle. And I love that, and that also fits with like the genre and just like feel of the stories too.
Mhm.
So that's really fun to see. And then I think I love what you said about like trends in your own work, and I'm noticing that too, coming from like starting my second comic,
Mhm.
is like, because you obviously don't have anything to compare when it's your first story, but then you go to the second one and you're like, wait, I do tend to like a lot of these
Yeah.
concepts, and it's fun to have those pop up. And the same thing with like starting with a theme, which I'm trying to do more, like I'm trying to put more effort into like knowing my theme at the start and working it in and kind of keeping it in mind as I write this new story,
Mhm.
versus just like writing and then finding the theme as you go, and how the process is different.
Mhm.
But I think that brings us really well to the next question of how do you figure out your theme and what can you do with it once you've identified it, whether you have it at the beginning or you find it out as you go along. So let's go back up to Delphi. And how do you figure out your theme, and what are the many possibilities you can do with it?
Yeah. So to Crispy's point, like emergent things are going to happen the more you make stuff. You as an author are going to find out what you want to talk about, whether that's self-acceptance or responsibility or anything like that. Like whatever is important to you in your soul is going to come out in your work somehow. So the first thing you have to do is make the work, in my experience. Like I can't just figure out a theme on paper and write to that theme right away. I have to kind of get something out of my head and look at it. And then I take out my magnifying glass and I play detective, and I'm like, how is this like this? How is that like that? Like what connections can I draw here? Another thing you can do is you can show it around to other people and say, what are you seeing here? What, when you look at this work, like what is the message you're getting from it, or what are the similarities between the character struggles, or what's interesting to you about this? And a lot of times your peers can kind of help you guide into a theme. I remember about 8 years ago, one of my really good friends, Robin Childs, does so much cool writing and stuff, and they also do writing coaching. And I went ahead and I asked them to do a thematic analysis of Somnolus. They came back with this like 13-page wonderful document of all the things they were looking at, and it just really kickstarted a lot in my mind and got some juices flowing when I was at a point where I was feeling a little stuck thematically. So I think there's a real power in that. If you have a developmental editor friend or somebody that you want to reach out towards, like that's a thing that they can help you with as well. And just also themes are a little different than tropes and genre, but there's there's thematic elements there too. Like if you're telling a vampire story, there's a certain expectation that you're going to address certain themes. There's it's probably going to be a darker thing because that's what a lot of people do. But you can look at what other people are doing in those with those tropes or with that genre, and kind of see like what attracted you to that in the first place, and that can kind of sometimes help you. Going back to vampires, like you might have themes based on character compared to character. So if you've got two vampires, you might find yourself talking about the different ways they handle their bloodlust, like which way is healthier in the long run, like who's got their act together. Maybe neither of them do, but like you might find themes when you compare two characters. You might find themes when you compare two cultures. So maybe you have a vampire and then you have a human and they're friends, and you talk about what things they both value, why they were attracted to each other and friends, but what being raised in a vampire society versus a human society changes about what tools they reach to approach their goals or how they approach their relationships. That can be very interesting to me. And culture can include things like values, religion, life experience, tragic backstories, all that good stuff. And yeah, I also love thinking about video games with a quest mechanic, because the types of things your characters will be asked to do by NPCs in a video game is usually influenced by the area you're in and the culture of the people living there. So I'm going to pull out Legend of Zelda. Like, if you go into a Gyarados area in any of the games, you're working with the desert and the extreme weather. So there's going to be plot directions that have you finding water or dealing with the heat and sandstorms, because that's the reality of living in a desert. Then you've got this extreme female run society. So there's going to be a lot of plot things related to the gender dynamics. You're going to have to go in disguise sometimes, or you're going to have to like deal with like their man hunting classes or whatever. Like, there's so many things about the gender stuff that's super interesting in Gyarados society. But then you're tying back into the larger Zelda themes that kind of come up. There's a lot of big themes from learning about the past. If you don't understand the history or what happened in the past, you can't face that in the future. And Gyarados in particular, they have stuff buried in the sand. There's usually something that you have to like dig out, or a temple that rises up from the sand, or a big monster or something. So it's kind of your duty to physically and spiritually uncover things again and again and again. And that echoes things when you go out to the larger map of other things that are happening in Zelda. There's things you have to find over and over again. There's a forest and it's maze-like, and you have to find the sword again. And there's other, the Zora areas. I could just talk about Zelda forever, so I'm not going to. But there's I think it does a beautiful job of having a theme, having larger themes and having micro themes. And I think that's an easy way for me to kind of think about like macro versus micro and how those two connect.
And the point about the different areas and like based on environment is kind of a good visual to keep in mind, and help if you're stuck. And like you can like branch out from looking at your characters to, okay, what's in their environment that would affect what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're tying into the theme that you want. Yeah. So many good thoughts there. I do feel like I just got a free theme critique about my vampire
Oh my gosh.
story I'm working on. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. So I'm not making notes for myself to use at a later date. Not at all. Nope. And Finn, how do you figure out your theme, and what do you do with it in your stories?
Boy, I think Delphi already said so many very important good things. Generally, I think I do what a lot of people do, and stuff that you have already hinted at, and work backwards from it. That, like, I try to figure out the plot, I look at the individual parts, and then I'm like, okay, what's the connective tissue? What's the thing at the heart of that story? And if I can think about this for a little while, I'll probably have my theme. I think it's also fair to say I have a theme in mind. There's this like really important thing that I want to talk about. For example, I want to talk about grief and what grief does to people, and I want to structure a story around that specific theme. But I feel, especially in webcomic circles, most people will probably start with characters and a story in mind, and then slowly develop the themes with that. So, and that's certainly also what I do. I sometimes
Yeah.
think about it, and I'm wondering if it's like a good or an approach that makes like the strongest story, because once you have that theme, it's kind of like your plot line or the thread that you can use, the through line, to not go off the rails and stick to what you actually want to say with your story. So if you're kind of like developing your themes as you go, you might probably run into the issue of you kind of don't know what your themes are, and you're kind of just playing along and you're not really thinking about it because there are just these characters and you want to tell the story, so the themes might kind of be accidental, or worse, the themes that you intend or that you think your story has might be themes that your readers are totally disagreeing with and they see something completely different. So I think that for developing your themes, you should try to like figure that out in the earlier development stages and then work it into your story. So if you wait too long to actually think about what are my themes, that can kind of bite you in the butt in the long run.
Yeah, such a great point of wanting to like the benefit and what like what you can do with knowing your theme ahead of time, and then the downside of waiting too long to figure it out. I definitely felt that in my first comic. I didn't really think about theme, and if I had from the beginning, I think everything would have tied together and kind of stayed on track a bit more. Yeah, just a great way to think about theme is that it's like the guiding principle of your story, and it can help you make sure that you're telling the story you want. So excellent thoughts, Finn. Crispy, how do you figure out themes and what do you do with them?
Okie dokie artichoke. So, kind of like what I've said in or touched on a little bit in my first kind of answer is that like we try to keep themes in mind. Of course they're going to kind of come naturally with, those patterns that I was talking about, but moving forward it's kind of fun figuring out those patterns and then, putting them in your work. So, we usually start with like a simple desire from the main characters and work on what it means as a whole narratively. Like, why do they want to do the thing and what does it mean to them? And I think that's that meaning that starts to interwove itself into the entire plot, that you're like, okay, wait a second. Like, this is a bigger kind of thing here. Like, this is oh my goodness, this is a theme, like a capital TH theme. I guess H is not capitalized. Anyway,
Yeah.
it
It
could
could be.
be.
Maybe it's a yeah, it could be. You can capitalize that H if you
And I
want.
think I will, because like when it starts to become more apparent in your work, you're just like, okay, as you're developing the characters, it's weaving that pattern. And I'm finding that like it's interesting to see it domino into other characters, and as the plot kind of progresses with that theme, because you want to uncover what these things start to mean to the characters, and then it's just reflecting on like, the plot as a whole, because I'm like, it's not going to move if the character's not going to move with the plot, or at least it's not going to be interesting if the characters aren't moving. So
Mhm.
as those things start to develop, you're going to find again that pattern, and it's going to start kind of blossoming and turning into something that you can pick apart. So with Ghost Junk Sickness, we started with like Vaughn's need, like I was talking about before, who's a main character, to find a place of belonging and self-worth. And then we start to reflect like, okay, like this is Vaughn's kind of like, motive, or, their background kind of thing. And what does that mean for like our other characters like Trigger or Bogmouth and stuff like that? And, we're finding that these characters kind of want the same thing, but they're going about it differently in ways that make sense to their character too. So, we have these desires, and we throw them on a cork board, and we start kind of picking or putting them together and seeing how they connect. And I think that's like one of the biggest things, is to be like, okay, we're figuring out characters, but you want it to be cohesive, especially when you have like a story that has like a bigger cast and you want to explore like them as characters. I feel like a theme is just a nice way, again, just to kind of wrap that up in a neat bow and make it feel cohesive, because there's a lot of times where I've read stuff that it's just like, I don't like, it's a little chaotic. It's just like I don't see a theme that's tying these things together. So the wants and the desires are just all over the place, but a theme can help that. It could really pull that together so that it's just like, oh, okay. And it's not in a way where it's just like, oh, all three of these characters are doing the exact same thing and I can see where this goes. It's not that, because they're all going to be finding it in a
Mhm.
different way, and it's underneath. It's just It's not screaming you in the face that this is the theme, but it feels like it all fits together, and it feels like it fits the story that you're kind of going through. So yeah, we figure out, like, in a little timeline, like, what are these characters' desires and what does it mean to them. And so as far as Fawn and Trigger were concerned, when I was talking about them, Fawn wants to see themselves as worthy of love, and Trigger does too, but again in his own way. And I like that it's so unique and personal, and it makes finding that theme and sticking to it helpful to figure out what we want to do and where we want to end up in the story, and how that makes sense at the end of the story. Like, was that wrapped up? Like, do the readers, are they picking up what we're putting down? And I think that's where I'm really conscious of it. And I think because Ghost Junk was our first original big story that we've decided, Space and I, to do together, you're not going to figure this stuff out in the beginning sometimes, especially when it's like your first work. Like, that's a lot, and themes are pretty big. But we found it out in the middle of the story because we were discovering our patterns. So by chapter, like, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, we're like, these keep coming back, these keep reappearing. And when we found that out, we got this trajectory of like, okay, so we're going to kind of focus on going in this direction for these character arcs, because the plot can also start to feed into that, and it feels satisfying. I think that's like the biggest thing, is that when you can see a theme is clearly given that care and making sense in both the characters and the plot, the whole thing feels satisfying to not only write but to read. Like, it feels like, okay, there was care put into this, and we're not just sitting here and the writer is just throwing things and being like, now we're here. It doesn't really make sense because I just wanted to go here in the plot, but we're here now, and it the characters are disconnected from the plot kind of thing. So again, themes really help with that.
Yeah. Agrees. Again, so many great thoughts. And I the why is so important in helping figure out the theme and helping maintain the theme throughout, and maintaining that cohesion. Like, and I feel like every character can have an, like, if your topic is like love, for example, every character has an opinion on love, whether it's the forefront of their mind or it's a background. But even just having them not care about it is their opinion on it, and kind of focusing on how everyone feels about that topic, or feels about love, justice, revenge, whatever, and why they want it, why they want to belong. Like, just the why is so important, and can really help in figuring out your theme if you're stuck. And on that note, we've thrown in a lot of good advice already, but let's dive into what advice, if do you have for someone who's stuck on figuring out what the theme of their story is, whether they're just starting or they've have 12 chapters of their comic already and they're trying to figure it out. Let's go back to Delphi. Give us your advice.
Oh gosh. Well, I feel like that was my exact experience, just being so many chapters into my comic, and I was doing the things I wanted to do. I was just having fun with my characters. I wasn't really thinking about like what I was saying or whatever. I was just attracted to certain things. But like that happened on a subconscious level for reasons. Like, I like the things I like, and I was attracted to the story I wanted to tell for reasons. And there can only be good things for learning what those reasons are, I think. So I encourage you to just try to dig into that and explore that. And I feel like I always come back to video games. So if you have a webcomic with a lot of characters in a lot of places, and they're feeling pretty disconnected, it's just stuff out there and nothing seems to be satisfyingly connected. What kinds of macro and micro challenges are the characters facing? So in a video game context, this might be side quests versus plot quests that fit the theme. So if your theme is you can't ignore your problems and you need to do the hard work to fix them sometimes, maybe the first thing I'm showing is my main character, they burn their breakfast and they just dump a whole bunch of ketchup on it to make it okay. That's a micro action. My comic is not about breakfast or ketchup, but it's a quirk that I'm showing of that character. We're seeing the option they chose to try to make it okay, and that says something about them. So let's hang on to that and see where it goes, right? So maybe they're going out later and they talk to their friend who is planting in their garden and complaining, oh, the recent storm uprooted everything and they have to redo their whole garden. And so the little video game side quest pops up. Character, please help me with this long and tedious task of replanting my garden. But we already know from the previous scene that they didn't redo their eggs in the morning. They didn't cook a new set of eggs. They just tried to dump some ketchup on it and fix it. So what's the dump the ketchup on it solution here? Maybe it's buying a bunch of fake plants and jamming them in the dirt. And now we've got this contrast between two characters, because you saw what the friend character wanted was like the actual hard work and like the results of having a garden. But the contrast between the main character is like, well, you didn't give me what I wanted. You're actually making more work for me because I have to get rid of all this like plastic flowers that you jammed in my yard. Like, thanks for nothing, buddy. So now you're showing like you're introducing other characters into that mindset and challenging the main character's mindset in a small way. But again, my comic really isn't about the garden. It's not about fake plants. Maybe I want like some magic thing. I'm doing a fantasy thing, and now I'm showing that they messed up this huge magic spell and they have to fix the effect of the magic that has gone wrong. And now the stakes are bigger. Maybe lives are at stake. And now they're seeing why the ketchup solution maybe wasn't the best solution. So what's the ketchup here that fails? And what do they learn and try to fix it with? And it all comes from the ketchup, right? Like you had like a small thing that leads to a larger thing that leads to a larger thing. And I think that's what we've all been saying here. But one thing that so I'm using the environment and I'm using the small things and the character quirks to help me get there to my theme. And I think one pothole I see that people stumble into sometimes is that they don't really want to show anything outside their one main character. They have a character, they're going through some big emotions, but nothing thematically in the environment or the plot is giving me the tension I need to align with the themes that the author wants for me. Everything in the story is telling me their environment is fine, they have friends, they're giving us sassy one-liners all the time, they are physically safe, they are not struggling with anything in their life. So I'm not going to feel it as hard when you come up with their tragic backstory to tell me why they're actually sad. And in this case, I think there is a place for building a false sense of security, or, hey, they're lying about their feelings or something. But you also have to give your readers indications that sense of security is going to break. It's a fragile thing, and we're going to see the rough edges sometimes. One thing I think about, because apparently I can't stop thinking about video games, is Final Fantasy VII.
That may be the theme of this episode.
Maybe, I don't know.
How everything ties back to
video games
video
are so good. But Final Fantasy VII, you have the gold saucer, right? And it's this like Vegas, like shiny, fancy place for rich people. And it's just like, it's got the tinniest happy music that you can imagine. It's like everything is just decadent and ridiculous to the point of, but it's not a happy story. It's from everything else that's happened in Final Fantasy VII, this is not a happy place, and this was built on the backs of some terrible stuff. So like you see the rough edges, you have to see that happening. And I feel like that's a nuance that you kind of work into your theme when you want to do kind of a switch like that, I want to say. Yeah, I think the thing though is to start simple and just get things out on the page and see where they go and see what kind of patterns that you notice, because there's going to be patterns. And I don't know, I just think it's beautiful to just kind of see
them come to life. Yeah. It's one thing I love about creating a story and reading stories is just seeing all the characters and their choices. And like you said, you can't just have everything be perfect and expect a theme to get through. And that's that's just a kind of basic storytelling principle, is you need a conflict, but your theme ties into how or I guess how your character handles the conflict and how they act, whether it's dumping all the ketchup on the problem or not, should tie in to the theme that you're wanting to convey. And like starting simple and then just kind of analyzing action by action and the snowball, and such great thoughts. Anyway, what about you, Finn? What advice do you have for someone stuck figuring out a theme?
Yeah, so I'm gonna suggest something super boring, and that is get your English literature knowledge out, take comics, video games, books that you like, and do some literary analysis. Because that as a practice can help you see, hey, how are these authors implementing their themes, how are they working with it, what are their patterns, and then you can try and use this or apply this to your own work and see, okay, what am I doing similarly, what am I doing differently, can I see similar patterns in my work. And I think that's like, if you kind of like stretch your analytical muscles a little bit every once in a while, and you go out and seek these things out in other people's works and analyze them, you will have an easier time to be able to recognize similar patterns in your own work. Because especially with people that maybe just started writing their own comics, or younger people, for the most part, the thing that you want to do is, oh, I have some cool characters and then I have a cool story idea and I just want to jump right in and I want to let everything play out. And you might not actually think about what you're doing or what you want to achieve in the long run, because you have ideas for some cool scenes, or you have this idea for the cool fight between your villain and your protagonist or whatever. So I think, or for me, it sometimes helps when I can take a step back and I read something else, and then I go into analysis and I'm like, okay, what are the themes here? What is resonating with me? What can I maybe also adapt for my own work? And it might sound a little bit tedious, because you're basically like investing work into analyzing someone else's story, but I think in the end it can be very helpful to learn some of the tools and learn some of the theory to then apply to your own work and maybe get a better understanding of what you're actually doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. And I, coming from webcomics, where it's a visual medium in a large part, so there's a lot of information about learning how to draw and learning art and referencing old art, other artists, and kind of using that to build and learn. But you don't get told a lot in the webcomic sphere to like necessarily go and research literary analysis and how to write stories. And I think it's great that you pointed that out, because that is so important and how you learn. And if there's one thing I've learned from being on this podcast in general, is all of our topics, all of our conversations all overlap. Like theme overlaps with plot, overlaps with conflict, overlaps with sad wet cat Olympic tragic backstories. Like it all ties in together, and you have to be able to know all of these aspects and understand them all to properly apply them. And so just it may be tedious, but I think it is so important, and I'm really glad you pointed that out, Finn. What about you, Crispy? What is your advice?
Me. I definitely want to point out the fact that it's like echoing Finn. It is really important to do these kind of studies, and I know that as soon as you hear the word studies, you're like, long grown. But like, you're sitting there, you're
Mm-hmm.
playing some video games, you're playing Zelda, you're playing Final Fantasy VII. Like, these are things that you're sitting there enjoying. These are the movies, these are the whatever. This is all this media that you're enjoying. So I think it's good to like reflect, be and be like, why do I enjoy this? And maybe you're going to find that pattern, and maybe you're going to be like, oh, okay, like this is why I want it in my work. This is why I'm inspired to do these things, because I'm seeing like a lot of them, explore these certain kind of themes that I want to explore too. And like that can feed itself for that. As far as my advice is concerned, one thing that I've learned is kind of taking my story apart, and I like to make little lists or timelines. So put your characters down on a timeline and write down their motivations at the beginning of this little timeline, and then start, on this little line that you have, writing down the major plot points or, moments as you go along. And are you seeing something similar with their decisions that they're making? Like, why are they making them, and what are these decisions doing for the story? And just kind of plotting that out and seeing what it looks like in that physical kind of form, you might start to see something interesting that you're subconsciously kind of writing. And then you can refine from there. You're going to see these little like, oh man, like I noticed that, when I'm putting these characters in situations, they're making these decisions a lot. Like, what does that mean for me, writing that way? And, why are they always running away from like certain decisions? Or, why are they always putting ketchup on everything? Like, what is this ketchup bottle to them? And I'm noticing that like other people are also wielding this ketchup bottle for their burnt breakfasts. So, when these things start to pop up, like that's a good point, like Finn said and Delphi mentioned, to just analyze, being like, this is coming up a lot. What does it mean for me personally? Because I find that themes, as writers, creators, artists, I don't think that you need to cover every freaking facet of everything. Like, nobody's experiences are a monolith. We're going to have a theme that we might share with other people, but we're going to be writing about it. We're going to be connecting to it differently. We've touched about that in the beginning. And, I think that's just important to be like, what do these stories mean to us, and what do we want to say to people? And then you can have a theme that ties that nicely. It's cohesive, and it just feels satisfying when you reach the end and be like, oh, that was I could see that, like that was a good ride. The character arcs were satisfying, and it made sense, because themes help make sense of the big plots that we're trying to weave together, and I just think they're important.
Yeah, they really are so important. But I also feel like they're just not the obvious thing that you think of when you're plotting a story. And hearing all of this, talking it through, and just taking the time to think about it will make a difference in how your plot all comes together. And yeah, it's so important.
It is.
Yeah, and I feel like the thing is too, it's a little challenging, and I feel like it's very easy to be scared by this, right? Like it feels like, if I don't have a point, should I even be doing this? Should I,
Yeah.
like, if I haven't like figured it out, like should I be doing this? I'm like, you always have something to say. Like there is something in you that you want to say, and theme is just about saying it more effectively, or like Crispy said, putting a bow on it and making it feel satisfying. And being a little more deliberate about that. You're going to say something whether you're deliberate about it or not, but like if you can be deliberate about it, you're going to be more effective.
Yeah. It's like making sure you're getting across the message that you want. And like, I think it was Finn that said earlier, other people might get a different theme that you didn't intend if you don't think about it. So making sure that you're wrapping up the right package and presenting it so that that comes across in your work. And it's definitely like level 2 of writing, at least. I mean, this is like assuming there's like 5 levels. I don't know. It's like the next step to level up your writing, I guess, is adding in a theme and focusing on it and making it come out in your work, and it just will elevate your work more than it was.
So it's not
before.
Hyrule Castle, but it's the Gerudo area, right? Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. To bring it back to Zelda, our unintentional theme of the episode.
Or was it intentional?
I don't know. Subconscious or conscious? Only you can tell us. I think that makes it a Gerudo salmon wrap. I don't know if Gerudo
Yummy.
has salmon, but you know, it
No, they're in
sounds
the
good.
desert. They don't have fish in the desert.
There's
Okay.
oasis. There's a pond. Someone there's like maybe one salmon in there, but I mean,
Oh
someone
my
found
gosh,
it and
this
made a
is
wrap.
thematically bothering me a
Okay,
lot.
all right. Well, what kind of wrap would they have in Gerudo?
Oh, they've got.
Or like,
I want to say tortillas. They've got like a good
yeah,
molduga
okay.
meat. Like they
Oh,
could.
Molduga.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a Molduga tostada.
Ooh.
How about that?
Oh.
I've been your host, Miranda, and you can find my comic and other work at mirandacakes.art.
And I've been Delphina. You can find my webcomic Sombulus at sombulus.com.
I've been Finn. You can find my work at heirsoftheveil.com.
And I'm Crispy. You can find my work at ghostjunksickness.com or lunarblight.com. I'm so excited to have a Molduga tostada.
Put some ketchup on it.
Yeah. Sounds great. Oh my gosh, ketchup.
Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. You can find all our episodes at screentonescast.com. We've got a couple links over there to our Ko-fi and merch shop where your support will help us create more episodes and keep us talking about anything and everything webcomics. You can also find us on YouTube, Blue Sky, Tumblr, and our Discord server. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, rating, and supporting, and we'll see you next time.